Hello and welcome to Pennington AG Church Online. And thank you for joining us for this teaching today. You may notice that things look a little bit different today. This is a different space, a different posture, and backed by popular demand, Katelyn Lane, my wife, is going to be team teaching with me as we walk into a 5-week series on relationships that we are calling Loveology.
Yes, you guys are home. You're on the couch, you're in pajamas. We want to join you today.
Yeah, and we know during quarantine, this has put a lot of pressure on relationships.
Yes.
And if your marriage and your relationship has struggled a bit during the last 6 months, we want you to know that you're not alone. I've had about a half dozen people already reach out to me for marital counseling, for advice during this time. And if you're single, we also understand that being single during this could increase loneliness, or how do I find a spouse during this? And so we're going to spend 5 weeks talking about God's design for relationships.
Yes, it's a weird time. We are all in close quarters with our families, with our significant others, with our kids. So like some issues just might start arising in the surface, and we may have had like maybe one or two arguments.
Yeah, like one fight about the shed specifically in the last 24 hours. But yeah, we're just like you. All of us are going through it. And we're going to be, I think, teaching more so even from our mistakes our failures and our struggles and God's grace in that than we will as experts during this.
Yes. So we have our favorite books that we really love when it comes to relationships. For me personally, I love The Meaning of Marriage. This is one of the best Christian books I've ever read.
The best book on marriage from a Christian perspective.
Written by Tim Keller and his wife, Keller. And it's just it's truly the title. He goes into the purpose and meaning of marriage, which I think so many of us do not really understand, really compares it with the gospel and how God designed marriage and relationships. So we love this.
The next book we're going to recommend is Loveology, which is the book which the title is what we're going to be speaking from and using this book as a framework. And before anybody sends me a direct message or a comment on this, yes, it is another John Mark Comer book that he has written. And he's a pastor out in Portland that we just love and are excited about what God is doing through Bridgetown, the church out there. And so we'll be using that as a framework for this teaching series. And I've teased it in sermons before, but for those of you that don't know, Katelyn and I have been married almost 4 years now, this October. And so that might not give us enough credibility to speak on relationships, but what you might not know is we've known each other and been dating in each other's lives for 16 years.
Yes.
We first started dating when we were 18.
We have a history.
Yeah. And into that, we're going to talk about and be honest as we can and vulnerable about our relationship, the struggles we've had in it, so that hopefully you can be vulnerable and honest wherever you are in your singleness or in your marriage. And I also want to give an encouragement because I know these series is sometimes if you're single, if you're not yet married, or if you're divorced or widowed at some point in your life, are tough to go through. And please know, we didn't get married till we were 30. And so we have a lot of our lives have been about being single and what that looks like, figuring out dating and what God's plan is for our lives. And so we're just going to take this journey with you, all right?
Yes.
In 5 weeks, we're going to cover 5 topics of what the Bible talks about as relationships. And so today we're going to introduce and talk about love, what it means and how we understand it. And then marriage, which will be taught by a friend of ours, Anthony Gilmer from Central Church nearby. We're going to talk about sex, then romance, and then finally, gender. What does the Bible have to say about that? And we're going to begin today by asking this question. And we're going to ask it to you, and you may have thought this in your life. Why do we want and need relationships? Why do we want and need love so bad? Why?
Well, first we have to understand relationships are created and defined by God. So we have to understand this was not created by humans. This has always existed. And what I love about Christianity and our faith is that God, before we even existed, was and has always been in relationship with the Trinity. We have God the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. So we worship and serve a God that's all about relationships. So it makes sense that he created this world and created us to be in relationships. So that is why this series, we are looking to the Bible. We are looking to our Creator and seeing how he defines all these components of relationship.
Every step of this teaching is going to be biblical. And we're going to go back to the text. What does Scripture say? What is God's ordained plan for this? How do we understand it? And we're going to take our understandings, maybe that we've gained culturally or we've come up with, and we're going to run them through the filter of God's Word. Second, that we're going to see in this is that relationship is in our DNA. We are made to give and receive love. It's who we are.
Yeah.
In Genesis 1:27, it said God made us in his image. And the author of John tells us that God is love. And so if the God of love, who is love, made us in his image, we are hardwired for relationship. We're hardwired to love each other and to desire to be loved. This is why, if you study around all of Earth's cultures, ancient and modern, Eastern and Western, every culture has an understanding or a concept of marital commitment between a man and a woman to create a family, to raise children, to serve and care for one another. This is a universal human expression. And so marriage is not a product of humanity or culture. We can't help it. We are lovers. Give yourself permission to desire and to need love. It's part of who we are. And then you're going to ask the question then, well, if it's part of who we are and it's God's nature in us, then why does it struggle so much? Why 50% divorce rates? Why does it hurt when we go through this? And so we want to also talk about the fact that there is a relational enemy. There's a relationship enemy. And we teach at Pennington AG Church that there is a spiritual force working against us known as Satan or the devil, the deceiver. And he has no agenda other than the opposite of what God's agenda is. And so God desires for us to be in order and goodness and multiplication in life. That's God's desire for his creation. And so Satan's work is to bring chaos, selfishness, and destruction into it. He takes what God creates and he destroys it.
Yes, and we see that from the very beginning in Genesis, where Satan is always trying to destruct what God creates. And these are some common lies that he will often try to deceive us with when it comes to
You might be going through this and you might believe some of these.
Yeah, so one lie is God isn't our lover, which is why we're always looking for love in different places, right? God isn't after our joy. He has all these do's and don'ts when it comes to relationships. So the enemy will often say, like, he's not after our joy. We can't trust God in relationships. A lot of times we see God as like this distant single man who like just doesn't have any concept or understanding of what it's like to be in a romantic relationship. God's way isn't the best, and we know better than God. So these are very common lies that the enemy will try to tell us when it comes to relationships.
And you can see the first attack of the enemy, the first attack of Satan is on relationships.
Yes.
In Genesis 3, the first thing he attacks is the relationship between humanity and God himself. He says, well, did God really say that? Can you really trust him? Is that really the character of God? And he brings division between God and humanity. And then immediately afterwards, in almost the same breath, he then attacks marriage. And he brings animosity and division between husband and wife, between man and woman. And immediately God comes down and Adam throws Eve under the bus. It was her. You gave her to me and she messed this all up. And everybody's pointing fingers at each other. And then from Genesis 3 onward in the Bible, in the Old Testament, we see story after story of relationship struggles, pain, and flawed natures over love, marriage, sex, romance, and gender. And all of this is the work of the enemy to bring chaos into God's ordered plan for our loving relationships. And so we want to start out this series talking about love.
Love.
Specifically, our love. All right, so let's tell the story of our passionate, infatuated love. How did this begin?
How did it all begin? It was one summer night. No, so Brian and I kind of knew each other growing up in high school. My best friend went to school with Brian and they were friends. So I got to hear about this Brian.
We co-led a Bible club together.
Yes. Yeah, so I'd hear about Brian, and it was the summer we graduated from high school is when it all happened, right?
Yep.
So Brian one night called me, and it was like one of those phone calls that went into the late hours of the night.
I first emailed her, actually, which is a sad underlining of the beginning of our relationship. I emailed.
Funny. It was funny. He seemed nervous.
I was
nervous. But he called me, and we talked all night, and it was so cute, because I remember in the beginning of our conversation, like us kind of planning a date, and it was like
next week.
In a week we do it, and as
Wednesday
we kept talking,
then Sunday night,
the date got
and then
sooner.
How about first thing
like,
tomorrow?
Tomorrow, why don't we hang out?
This
tomorrow?
is also now at 5 a.m. on the phone, and we've been talking for 6 hours.
Yeah, and so it was so amazing. Like we went out on our first date, and it was perfect. Like I remember just everything about that day was so amazing. He took me out to eat. We walked in a park and asked each other questions. We held hands for the first time.
That was my 10th question.
And it's just like, I really look back at that day, and like when people ask like, what's a day you would relive? That's definitely like a day that comes to my mind. I loved it.
And then that was actually just 3 weeks before college started for both of us.
Yes.
And Katelyn went to college in Virginia, and I went to college in New Jersey, so we were 6 hours away. So in those first 3 weeks,
created so much emotion.
We jammed every date we could into those 3 weeks. We must have gone on like 12 dates in 3 weeks.
Yeah.
That's part of my nature and a little bit of maybe my frenetic flaw of who I am. But I was like, we got to date. We got to do this.
Oh my gosh.
And then we had a really whirlwind first year of dating. And I was so passionate about Katelyn, and I thought about her all the time, and I would take long walks around campus, and I would call her, and we'd talk long into the night. And honestly, thinking back on it, I did such cheesy romantic things. My phone, and I had an old Nokia brick phone that was indestructible, and the ringtone I had
remember when that was a thing, when you'd have like a song as your ringtone?
So my song, when phones still had ringtones, was Wouldn't It Be Nice by the Beach Boys. And so every time I got a call was, wouldn't it be nice if we were older in the kind of world where we belong? And I remember my pastor at the time, when I was in New Brunswick, told me that is so lame. He said, you're not, he was older, and he's like, you're 19. Oh, the world doesn't understand you guys. Oh, wouldn't it be great if you were older? And he pointed out how cheesy and lame I was being. Although I will say, we're older, and it's better, and it worked. But as we talk about our relationship, and even this first year, we're going to say all throughout, our relationship is descriptive, not really prescriptive. And so learn from a lot of our mistakes, and I wouldn't say you need to wait 12 years before you marry the person God's put in your life. But we're going to talk a little bit about more of this love in our lives.
Yeah, so what does in love mean? We just described to you our first year. We were dating, and we were so into each other, and there were so many strong feelings. So what does in love mean? And I know like with our culture, like definitely falling in love means like you are just passionate. Like you are passionate about the
romance of it.
Yes, the romance, the feelings.
I can't help it. It's just, what she does,
And like even in today's like society, we have a lot of passions, right? Like we're into things. Like there's the expression like I'm obsessed. I'm obsessed with this thing, or you're my person. So we really like get into our passions. But the problem is if we just like view being in love as like what you're passionate, what you're strong.
I love hiking. I love movies. I love travel.
Yes.
It works well for things.
It does. But then when we're just viewing like relationships and people like that, like what happens when you're not feeling it? And that can happen, right, over time.
I might love hiking in my 20s and my 30s, but then I'm not as passionate in love with it in my 50s and my 60s. Well, what happens when that's a person? We are passionate about them and then not. So when we say, I love you, we usually mean, in today's culture, when I'm around you, you make me happy.
Yes.
And I love you means the feelings you give me makes me happy. And by this logic, honestly, when you stop making me happy, I'm no longer in love with you.
Yes.
And so I love you when I feel it. And when I don't feel it anymore, I don't love you. And this is where we say the expressions like falling in love and I'm just not in love with you anymore. What if someone
fell out of love?
Yeah, I fell into it. I fell out of it. What if somebody could make me happier than you make me? Or even when you're dating, this is a struggle for a lot of us. What if someone else could theoretically make me happier? And so I'm happy in this dating relationship, but someone else out there could make me happier. And I have this list, and maybe they could. We need to understand that this aspect of love and the way we've constructed it is selfish.
Yes.
It's me focused. Let's just call it what it is. It's about how you make me feel and about what I want out of life. Additionally, it puts pressure on the other person that they cannot possibly withstand.
And even like fear that like I love this person, and what if they're not interested in me in time, or what if someone else catches their attention,
or if they don't make me happy because they're supposed to fix my life, solve all my problems, bring me joy forever.
So there's a lot of pressure, and it's not like it's definitely from our culture and our society. Like I know for me growing up, I'm like in my 30s, so my friends who are in their 30s or 20s, like we grew up with Disney movies, right? And even like one of my earliest memories that I have as a child was seeing The Little Mermaid in the movie theaters, and I actually can visualize the last scene of like the rainbow and the wedding, and it always ends with the wedding, right? So many Disney movies, so many fairy tales end when the prince and the princess find each other, and it's almost like that's it. Like that's what you're looking for in life, and your story's over like once you find it. So there's just so much pressure with that significant other, and we don't even like realize that it's been ingrained in us.
If we're talking about our first year of dating, as passionate and as infatuated as it was, if I'm being honest, that relationship was about me.
Yeah.
And was about how Katelyn made me feel, about myself and my life and my self-worth.
And your ego even.
Yeah. And I wanted Katelyn to serve me and what I needed emotionally. And most of our understanding about love is about these selfish feelings.
Yeah.
And so we're going to actually look to the Bible and see the great example God gives us. Yes. And love equals Jesus on the cross. This is our definition of love, and this is the example we look to. The author of 1 John says it like this in 4 verse 10. This is love, not that we loved God, but that he loved us and sent his son as an atoning sacrifice for our sins. Love is an emotion. It is. We feel it. We do. But it needs to be so much more than that.
Definitely.
When it comes to feeling love, we're in the passenger seat. It just happened to me. It came over me. But the biblical view of love is you're in the driver's seat. It's your choices. It's your actions. It's your decisions as you decide to care for and serve another person.
And there's nothing wrong with romantic feelings. I mean, God created them for us to have. And we even see it in the Bible. We see it with Adam in Genesis 2. When the first time he sees Eve, he says, this one is bone from my bone and flesh from my flesh. She will be called woman because she was taken from man. So he's actually being very poetic and being like stirred by his emotions. And we also have this amazing book in the Bible, Song of Songs, that is a celebration of romance. Yeah. So we're not saying that love is just action, like it's also feelings, but there's like a balance with it.
And so we need to look at Jesus, and in Jesus, he teaches us that love is not just about making me feel happy. And if that's the understanding we come in with, Jesus immediately destroys that. Yes. He goes to a cross. Yes. He weeps over his people. He serves his disciples. This doesn't look anything like happy feelings. And so let's commit to this understanding. Love is a feeling and an action. Love, the action verb, is the whole story. At its core, love, as defined by Jesus on the cross, is action-oriented, and it's a verb that we take part in. John writes this in John 4. For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son. Paul writes this in one of his letters to an early church. He says, God did not spare his own Son, but he gave him up for us. And then Paul, in his letter to the Ephesians, he makes the same comparison for a man's love for their wife. And he says, husbands, love your wives, just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. Husband or wife, male or female, we can all take a lesson that the word here is gave. It's action-oriented. He gave, he did, he took action to express his love. In each of these, they use the action verb to describe God's love through Jesus Christ on the cross.
We also have to understand that love is serving, right? It's serving, and we can even see this when Jesus is washing the feet of his disciples. What I love about this illustration is it's kind of dirty and disgusting.
Yeah, it's
and
gross.
Sometimes love just gets dirty, doesn't it?
Yeah.
In a way. It's not like this beautiful like scene. It's Jesus getting down on his hands and knees. And in the first century, like washing feet was a really
gross.
Yes.
Demeaning.
Yes. Like not something that you would see a master doing to his followers, but that is what love is. It's like you're lessening yourself, you're going into a role that's not the most important role in the room, and we see Jesus doing this with his disciples.
The author John writes it like this in John 13. It says, so he got up from the table, he took off his robe, he wrapped a towel around his waist, and he poured water into a basin. Then he began to wash the disciples' feet, drying them with the towel he had around him. That for us, when we love, we have to say, are we going to put ourselves in the serving position of cleaning the grime off another person? Are we going to play the role of a servant? And are we going to become the least important person in the room? That I see myself as the least important person in this relationship. And that's how I serve and love you. Yeah. We both have seen this in action. Both of us have grandparents, and we got to grow up knowing them. And both of our grandparents, late in life, our grandmothers, passed away from dementia and Alzheimer's. And I can still remember, as a college student, coming home on breaks and seeing my grandfather care for his wife. And it wasn't pretty and it wasn't glamorous. Moments of him changing her, cleaning her, dressing her. And in these moments, it's not the picture-perfect romantic situation, but it is the beauty of self-sacrificing service to another person. And to understand love in the biblical perspective is that it's often messy and it's hard in order to put yourself in a position to serve and care for another person. As we said earlier, in this series, we're going to be taking our understanding of relationships and running them through the filter of Scripture. And our goal is to understand what God has to say about how we treat each other. And so let's begin by seeing love as the multiple meanings of love we come into. Because we just have one word for it in English. It's just love. And the problem with that is I love a lot of things in a lot of different ways. I love pizza. I love our cat. And I love Katelyn. And I love the God that I serve. And I love the four of them in very different ways. I don't love pizza in the same way that I love Katelyn. I don't love my cat in the same way that I love Jesus Christ, who died for my sins and is the king over all. But we use the same word.
Yeah, we do.
And you may have heard a teaching of through the Greek, that in the Greek there are 4 words for love. We're going to look at the Hebrew, and there are 3 words for love in the Hebrew Bible. Let's take a look at each of them.
Yeah, so the first word is raya, which is really the love you would have for a friend. A friend that has common interests like you do, and you just connect with them. And so that's the word we would use for like a friendship.
Yeah, your bro, your girls, your gang.
And then we have the word dad, which is the love that you have when you're feeling sexual desire. Romance. So
I need this person. I want them. Yeah. And then there is the third word, which we'll focus on, is Ahava, which is a deep, wide, and generous form of love. It's a love that goes down to your soul. It's a love that is relentless. It's a love that is by nature about commitment to serve and to care for. It's uncompromising. A great example is in Song of Songs, the long poetic story of 2 lovers coming together and their courtship, their marriage, and even their sexual intimacy. The book ends with a chapter focusing on Ahava, and the author writes it like this.
He says, "Place me like a seal over your heart, like a seal on your arm. For Ahava is as strong as death, its jealousy unyielding as the grave. It burns like blazing fire, like a mighty flame. Many waters cannot quench Ahava. Rivers cannot sweep it away."
The point of the poetry there is he is making a divide between love and death. And they understood death, and I think we do too, as something that is eternal, uncompromising, powerful, that we all face. And what the author says is the only force that can combat death is love itself, is this unrelenting commitment to serve and care through Ahava, self-sacrificing love. And we see this as the story of the Bible, that only love can overcome death. And we know this through the story of the cross, that it took love to conquer death. It took the love of our God to bring his son to this earth, to die in our place on the cross, and to conquer death through the love he has in the resurrection. And it's this aspect of love that conquers death itself.
And it's just so important in your relationship, in your marriage, to have this strong, committed love. And it's this Ahava love that will get you through the highs and lows that you are just going to go through in life, right? In the Bible, it says when we go through trial, right? Not if, when. So, you know how life is. And even now, like, we are going through some really hard times. And it's that Ahava love that will really get you through it. And for me, what's amazing, I got to witness, and one of the most amazing testimonies that I got to witness in my life was when I was a child. my mom actually got very sick when she was pregnant with my younger sister Grace, and where she actually lost her memory. She even lost her eyesight, and was basically in a 7-year decline after she gave birth. And it was really a hard time for my family, but it was amazing that I got to see this Ahava love with my mom and dad. My dad was so committed to her, so loving. And in the same way, my mom was like that with my dad. And they went through so much, but I got to witness this amazing, strong love that I know was founded in their relationship with Christ. And I don't know how we would have gotten through that as a family if they didn't have that for one another. And, we talked about the 3 loves, the da, the sexual, which, I mean, really, right over time, our bodies age and wrinkle, and that's not going to carry you through those tough times.
Sexual attraction is a part of marriage, but it's not going to carry you for 30, 40, 60 years.
Yeah, and even that raya, that friendship love, is important, but will it carry you through those really hard times? And that's why we see marriages when, it gets tough, when they don't have that commitment, that love.
What do you lean on when you're not having fun? What do you lean on when you can't be sexually intimate?
Yeah.
Where do you lean? And this is where God leads us into the self-sacrificing form of Ahava love. So we started out telling you about our intimate, infatuated first year of dating. And I've teased this in preaching before, but we want to share a little bit about the 10 years in between our first year and our final engagement and marriage. And we'll tell the rest of the story. So the first year happened, and it was great, and probably unhealthy in how we focused on each other, and pretty selfish. But at the end of that year, we had a summer, and the summer was phenomenal. We went on all these dates, and we had a lot of fun together. We finally got to let the relationship breathe a little bit. And in August, we went on one date that I loved, and I still have fond memories of it. We went to the beach, and I remember eating fried Oreos on the boardwalk. That's still the first and last time I've ever eaten fried Oreos. Yes. I remember Katelyn melting in my car, because my car didn't have air conditioning in college. And I remember her going, "I'm going to die. I'm melting. I'm going to die." And I have such fond memories of that. Yeah. We ended back at her father's place on the porch, and it was that night.
I broke up with him. Yeah. It was horrible.
I did not see it coming at all. It was so sad. And it was devastating. Yeah. I can still remember the swing that we were on as we had this conversation. And that actually began the next 3 years, which were probably less than ideal and pretty unhealthy in how we had a relationship. Because even though Katelyn broke up with me, I, in my own self-determined understanding of the relationship, wouldn't let it be. And so basically what happened was, for the next year, we dated in secret and didn't call it dating, but would still text and call each other and would meet up sometimes when we were home on break. And I definitely was not open to dating another person, and it definitely was a fixation of my life. Yeah. And eventually in college, we started officially dating again, and we did that for about 3 years until we got back home. And at this time, we were back in New Jersey, and I was just starting a ministry position here at this church as youth pastor. And Katelyn had just gotten back and was looking for work. And I was excited that we were about to start our life together and had all these plans. And we broke up again.
Yeah.
And in that period of time, for about 1.5 to 2 years, I started life as a pastor here at this church, and Katelyn went back and you got your master's degree in elementary education, and we see the product of what that brought in our life. And after those 2 years, we tried to make it work again, and we got back together, and we dated for a little over a year, and we got engaged, and we were in our mid-20s at that time, and we celebrated. I was youth pastor, and our kids, our teens, threw us a big engagement party, and it was awesome. And we got like 7 spatulas and 10 whisks, because teenagers don't know what a married couple needs.
It was very cute.
Yeah, I still have some of them still at the house, almost 8 years later now. And in that engagement, we were excited, and I was kind of pushing forward in it, but something wasn't quite right with it. It wasn't really working and connecting. And after about 1.5 years of it, we broke up again. And I remember I had a lot of plans for my life and what marriage was going to look like. And I thought I was going to be at 27 a married youth pastor here at this church. But because of different circumstances, I was at 27 a single interim lead pastor here at this church. And Katelyn had her own understanding of how we ended up there.
Yeah, and for me, the big struggle was that I was viewing Brian and our relationship and really expecting things that only God can fulfill in my heart and in my life. And I think I just put so much pressure and almost paralyzed me to not commit and to not take that step moving forward in marriage, because I was just so there was just so much pressure in my mind of is he the right person for me? Will he make me happy for the rest of my life? What if we have problems? Or, the calling I have in my life, is he a part of that? I was really looking at Brian the way I should be viewing God. And it was until I think we were really apart and I was really alone is where I really got to experience and discover God's love and the gospel. And I basically realized that I was just viewing Brian in a completely wrong role. And he just couldn't fulfill that for me. And I think that's just why I couldn't move forward. So that was kind of what I was going through internally, and I couldn't even voice it, honestly. I didn't really even know what was going on. But it was that time by myself where I really discovered God's love. And it just it really freed me in a way when I experienced it. And it just took all that pressure away. And I truly understood that Ahava love. And really wasn't so much focused on my feelings and my fulfillment.
And when we tell this story, a lot of times I can kind of come off as a hero figure in it, because for 9 years I was pursuing and loving and trying to make this work. But honestly, and we don't share this part of the story all that often, but it was a lot of my own sexual sin was also a problem and a part of this. And for that whole time, I was struggling with pornography. And I wanted the Dodd aspect, the sexual nature of this. And I was 27 and a man, and I was like, man, I got to get to the finish line. I got to get married so I can have sex. And a lot of that made me selfish and blind to Katelyn's struggle during this time. I knew she was struggling. I could see it, that she was having a hard time moving forward in this, but I just kept pushing it. I was like, let's get married. Let's do this.
Just fixated on our own needs at that time.
And I had to, over that year and a half after that engagement fell apart, in ministry, in life, do some reevaluating on my own sin and my own selfishness. And I remember it was actually a distinct time in the morning after my devotions. I was actually in the shower, which is where I get a lot of clear thoughts, that I felt God speak to me in that time. You said in the engagement, you said in that relationship that you would care for her, protect her, and serve her, and you are not doing that. And you don't have plans to do that, and you haven't been doing that. And it was in that moment I had to reevaluate if what am I doing? And how am I viewing the love that I have for Katelyn, or the love I have for anyone? Am I just being selfish in what I get out of this? Or am I in this to expect and hope the best for Kate, the best for my future wife, to care for and love her? And we both, in that period of time, we dated other people, awesome people, but God brought us back together, and I think taught us a lot about his love for us in the cross to be able to express to one another.
And I think for me, it's just amazing because as we're talking about our story, there's just so many parts in that story, especially near the end, where I thought it was just done between us, and where it would almost just be, there's just so much of a past and so much hurt that it just wouldn't even be healthy for us to be together. And what's so incredible is we're talking about love and relationship. I just see Jesus, who just breathes life into relationships. And I don't know, there's so many of you watching this who are at such different phases and relationships. Maybe you're single, maybe you're newly married, maybe
you're married and you're struggling.
What's so incredible is that Jesus, the creator of relationships, the creator of love, can breathe life into your relationship. And that's the key. I mean, that was the key for us. It was when we finally surrendered this relationship to him. was when he really breathed life into it again.
And I want to encourage you, wherever you are in your relationship, if you're struggling with feeling or expressing love, turn that to Christ. And for us, it was really understanding his love and studying what God has shown us in the cross and the relationship of Jesus that taught us what self-sacrificing love is all about. And I want to give you an encouragement today. If you're watching this, and maybe you're not a Christian and you're not even a particularly religious person, and you're watching this, I want to encourage you that it's the love of God for his people that teaches us how to love and receive love from one another. And I want to give you an opportunity to receive that love today in this moment. And so wherever you are, if you'll just pray this prayer along with us of inviting God in to be our ultimate lover and caregiver and self-sacrificing guide in our lives, just join me in this prayer. God, today in this moment, I need to receive your love. I need to be loved by you, and I need to understand love through your work on the cross, that it is self-sacrificing, that it is messy, and that it is about the other person, God. Lord, I believe today that you are a God that loves me, that you gave your son Jesus up for me out of your love, and that Jesus, you died on a cross for my sin. You rose from the grave so I could be with you forever in eternity. You gave your life for me. Today, I commit my life for you. In the name of Jesus, I pray. Amen. If you prayed that for the first time today, we just invite you to just click the link below and let us know. We'd love to celebrate with you and start you on a journey towards healing and understanding the love that only Christ can give. We thank you for joining us today. We're going to be continuing to share about our life, our relationship, what it looks like. We're excited for Anthony to be sharing next week as well, as you join us as we discover in this study of love what God's plan is for our relationships.